Hi, my Be Health Empowered family. Welcome back for another episode of Excuse Me, Doctor. My name is Dr. Melissa Clark. Please call me Dr. Mel. I am delighted to be back here with you today, talking about the things that you need to know to make sure that you're making wise health decisions, not just for yourself, but also for your family and for your community. So, if you are checking us out for the first time, please make sure to hit that like button. If you're on Facebook, hit that subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, we are getting ready. We're gearing up right now for an incredible show. And in order to have an incredible show, I have to have my co-host with me, Mr. Wayne Bruce, Miss Lila Mays, co-host extraordinaire. How y'all doing?
What it do, Dr.
Hi.
Mel? What's up,
Hey, how's it going?
It's
Good.
going,
Happy
man.
Monday, everybody.
Happy Monday. Or
Right,
happy
that's
whatever
right.
day you're watching this.
Well, and
Yeah.
there you go. Right.
And there
Happy
Because
you
you know
day.
we're available on rebroadcast whenever you want it. So,
Indeed.
well, good.
rebroadcast.
So, yeah. So, what's going on for today? What do we have up?
Well, so listen, confession time. I've got a half a shelf, well, really one and a half shelves in my kitchen that look like a vitamin shop exploded. Right? Ashwagandha, collagen, turmeric, all the things. Some of it I don't even
Right.
remember buying.
Right.
Listen, listen, if supplements work, I would probably be a 25-year-old genius with rock hard abs. I mean, truth is, some of them's helpful, but a lot of it's hype. So,
Right.
and then there's a few that might even do a bit of harm to people, man. So,
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not even gonna lie, I'm right there with you, Lila. So that's that is what we are gonna tackle today. What is safe? What's a scam? How do we know exactly what our bodies need?
Yeah. And let's be honest, natural doesn't always mean harmless. And Instagram is not a licensed pharmacist.
and we got a
Folks.
straight up real pharmacist in the studio. So, who's gonna break it down and give us a lot of good info? So, that's what we doing.
Yeah. It's gonna be a great show. I mean, you're gonna learn what is worth your money, what could mess with your medications, for example, and maybe even why CMOS is or isn't the miracle that it's hyped up to be. So stay tuned.
CMOS.
Stay tuned. So before you check that mushroom berry fat burning elixir, share this link right now and stay tuned.
Stay tuned. But before we do that, because right now we're getting ready to go to the weekly recap, what's happening in health and wellness.
We,
Right
we
now.
need some music for that. We need like
Me
a little intro. I'm
too.
just saying.
I mean, we
But I
need
mean, you did it
something.
great. You did it great. But I mean, we did that could work. Some trumpet, something,
You want some
Something.
trumpets? You want some? What do you want? Or I forgot. Just for our community in the Caribbean diaspora.
There we go.
There we go. That'll work. That'll work. That'll work.
All right, let's get into it. So, first one up, Benadryl and dementia. I heard that taking medications like Benadryl could increase the risk of dementia. Is that true, Dr. Mel?
Well, yeah, there's some evidence suggesting that long-term use of a class of drugs called anticholinergic drugs. So, long word, it just means that those drugs affect a certain chemical that our body makes called acetylcholine. And that class of drugs includes antihistamines, like you take for allergies, like Benadryl, which is also called diphenhydramine. That's the chemical name. But anyway, that class of drugs, including Benadryl, is associated, some studies are showing, with an increased risk of dementia.
Wow. So, what exactly are, let me see if I can say it, anticholinergic drugs?
You're
Did I get
close.
that
You're
right?
close.
Oh, close.
Anticholinergic drugs, they block
Cholinergic.
the action of this chemical that I mentioned, acetylcholine, which is what our bodies make to relay messages between nerves in our bodies. So, in the brain specifically, acetylcholine plays a key role in learning and
Mm.
memory.
Okay, so by blocking acetylcholine, these drugs might impair memory and learning.
Exactly. And that's why there's this concern about long-term use, especially in older adults. So the study was done at University of Washington. They looked at 3,500 adults, lots of folks, age 65 and older. And they found that those who used these anticholinergic drugs for 3 years or more had a 54% higher risk of developing dementia compared to those who used them for 3 months or less. Sorry, yeah,
Okay,
3 months or less. So
okay.
short-term use versus that longer term 3-year use.
Are there any alternatives to these medications?
Yeah, definitely. So for Benadryl, for if you're taking it for allergies, there are newer antihistamines that you can consult with your doctor about taking that don't have these strong, anticholinergic effects that might be associated with the learning and the memory. And then um, there are also this class of medicine, not Benadryl, but another one in the class, is used to treat depression. So you might want to talk with your doctor, especially if you're over 65, to make sure you're not on a drug that has that anticholinergic effect, because there are plenty of other antidepressants in that class or outside of that class that you could use.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
So bottom line, don't take Benadryl chronically, especially for sleep, which is what a lot of people use it long term for.
Right.
wow. So we have number two. Number two, 5 minutes of funk. It ain't no jump. Getting funky with exercise. 5 minutes of funk. Ain't no, I mean, hey, look. So as we get older, there's a temptation to be a couch potato. I mean, I don't know where they got that from because I don't know any couch potatoes who are older unless they're watching
Okay.
football season. And when you think about working out, it can seem like a mountain that's too high to reach. But this is some encouraging news, Dr. Mel. What's up
Yeah.
with 5 minutes of funk?
So it turns out that there was a recently published article in a journal called Age and Aging, and they found as little as 5 minutes, hence the 5 minutes of funk, to moderate to vigorous physical exercise each day can help you maintain cognitive function in older adults. So 5 minutes of just getting funky, sweating a little bit, can really help out your memory power as you get older.
Wow, that's exciting. That's fascinating. What kind of cognitive benefits are we talking about?
So, speed in processing information, your working memory, so your ability to recall, and then also your ability, what's called executive function to carry out decision making and complex tasks. So all those things were shown to improve in people who have this, daily working out, moderate to vigorous physical activity for 5 minutes or more.
What activities qualify as moderate to vigorous physical activities?
Okay, yeah, great question. So, brisk walking, jogging, biking, swimming, playing tennis, or even dancing, as long as you're doing it, moderate activity, which means you could carry on a conversation, but with a little bit of difficulty, or vigorous, which means, you just really don't want to talk. You just want to do it because you're exerting yourself so much. The
I
key is
guess
really to elevate your heart rate and get moving.
so. Even if someone isn't very active, starting with just 5 minutes a day can make a difference. Small changes can make a difference in the funkiness. Get funky on the floor for 5 minutes. I'm talking like the
Correct.
Jello
Yes.
pudding man. I'm not trying to talk like him. Anyway, get funky, funky
Bottom
chicken.
line is small things can make a big deal, a big
Okay,
difference. Yeah,
that's it.
exactly.
So yeah, I think Lila's mic is out. Guess, yeah, yeah. Lila,
Okay,
Lila,
all right. Make it
Lila
happen there,
May.
Lie.
Can you hear me now?
You
Yes,
Yep.
we can hear you now.
I was saying, make sure you get those boots on the ground and those fans out.
I don't
Right.
want to see
And the
no
harder you
men with
the harder you
fans.
crack those
You can get
Okay.
fans, the
you
more
can get your boots
exercise
on
you
the
All right.
get.
ground as a man,
Whoever,
but you
anybody
better
who want
not
to get
put
their
our
fans
fan
out,
out
get your
there.
boots on the ground. Get
When
your
they
boots on the
racking
ground.
them
You know
fans, I
what?
better not see not one
Boots on
male.
the ground is not discriminating. As
It
long as
does.
you getting long as you getting your exercise in, that's what
Yeah,
matters.
that's true. That's true. That's true. That's true.
All right, moving on. The missing weight loss ingredient, fiber. So everybody is out here on social media talking about tracking macros, how much protein, carbs, and fat to eat to lose weight. But no one is talking about fiber. What's up with that, Dr. Mill?
They should be talking about fiber because fiber can play a significant role in managing your weight. It can help you feel full longer, which reduces the overall amount of calories that you take in. And
Yeah.
then fiber also supports your digestive health. It can lower, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, and protect against heart disease. It can improve your insulin sensitivity, which means how effective your insulin is in getting glucose into the parts of your body where it's needed. The opposite of that is insulin resistance, which is what you have when you have diabetes. So all these things help it, are good for overall health and for weight control.
So, how much fiber should I be consuming daily?
So if you're a woman, it
I'm not a
varies
woman.
based on gender. For women, 28 grams for adult women, and for adult men, 34 grams. But most Americans consume less than half of that, actually.
Wow.
So we have a ways to go in getting our fiber up.
Okay, so what are some good sources of fiber?
So if I had to pick three, I would say frozen berries, great
Mhm.
sort of actually more fiber than fresh berries. I would also choose chickpeas as a vegetable, but all your green leafies will work. Sorry, as a bean, but all your green leafy vegetables all will also work. And then there are nuts and seeds, and out of that category, I would choose chia seeds because you can throw them on your oatmeal, throw them in your smoothie. They actually help you feel full as well. So any of those would work, and also your whole grains like oats and quinoa and whole wheat pasta even will give you a little bit of fiber.
Okay.
Fiber supplements can be helpful, but it's important to drink a lot of water, right? When you're taking them.
Absolutely. You can use those fiber supplements certainly if you're having a hard time getting it in through your food, but it's really best to prioritize the whole foods because they give you a wide range of nutrients along with the fiber. So you want to try to focus on getting your fiber through food whenever possible.
So that packaged fiber could be like make you feel a little different.
Right. And you have to drink a lot of water with it.
Man, I'm just saying it might have. I
A little
don't even want to
gas.
go into that part of it.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah.
go into that part of it.
Okay.
You know what comes next?
The weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
All right, so Bonita Bam Bam said, I saw on TikTok that you can use Miralax as a budget Ozempic. It's so hard to get my doctor to prescribe the real thing.
I don't know about that. Excuse me, Dr. Mill, is that true?
Well, no, it is definitely not true. It is true that it might be hard to get your doctor to prescribe the GLP-1s like Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, because there are certain strict criteria for taking it. Even though we see, celebrities out here losing weight left and right on it, it's harder to get a prescription for it. And so as a result, people are turning to these, influencers on TikTok that are sort of leading them down the wrong path when it comes to advice like this. And one of the myths is that Miralax, which is a laxative, can actually be this budget Ozempic. At one point, it was so popular that it was selling out, and pharmacy shelves were going empty of Miralax. But the truth is that it's going to get rid of water weight and really important electrolytes that your body needs. And it's very dangerous to use laxatives in this way. Laxatives draw water out of your body, and makes your stool soft. So that's what they're intended for. But if you overuse it, it can lead to symptoms like weakness, dizziness, confusion. You could get dehydrated, and you could even get like electrolyte imbalances, potassium and sodium, which can lead to death by short circuiting the rhythm of your heart. So you really don't want to use laxatives in this way. It is definitely not a budget Ozempic.
It is not.
I would.
It is not.
Can you imagine
So
just trying to? They had a, it used to be a product called Slim Fast,
Mhm.
and in the hood they used to call it something else. Fast.
Yes, they did.
Right.
Right. So we want to stay away from those whenever possible.
Moving on.
Yeah.
All right, Dr.
All
Bell.
right. Well, thanks, y'all. We're going to see you back in a little bit. We are going to head into talking about supplements. So if you walk down the pharmacy aisle these days, you're going to find a sea of pills and powders and promises that, say you're going to get everything from glowing skin to better sleep to a sharper memory. So how much of it, though, is fact and how much is hype? Today, we're going to really dive into that booming world of health supplements, what works, what's risky, and what you really need to know before you pop that next capsule. So joining me is someone who really knows the science behind the labels, a licensed pharmacist, an expert in medication safety, who's here to separate fact from fiction. Dr. Gerald Jackson, he is the owner of Doctor's Pharmacy downtown in Columbus, Ohio. He has degrees in psychology, public administration, but he's a board certified registered pharmacist, and he is passionate about educating people of all ages on how to live healthier lives. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Jackson. Happy you're here.
Thank you, Dr. Mel. I love that conversation before I was able to actually go live on the show. Man, I really wanted to jump in on a lot of different topics, but man, really, really good stuff. So thanks for putting that information out there in the correct public way.
Oh, well, thank you. That's what we are here for, to again, make sure people have the information they need to make wise health decisions. So let's jump into the supplement discussion, though. So I want to start with the basics. What qualifies as a quote unquote supplement, and how is that different from the medication that you dispense or that is prescribed by a physician?
Well, that's an excellent question. And one of the things I want to make clear before I proceed with answering is that consumer confidence is extremely important to me. So the things that I say, please feel free to reach out with any questions you may have, and during a short period of time with some of the responses that I may have to these questions. So just to jump right into it, just the first thing that's important is that remember that supplements are just that. They're just supplements. They do not replace a care plan or therapy that will be considered maybe a prescription drug. So if you're taking medication for blood sugar, taking cinnamon or some other supplement to help reduce your blood sugar does not replace a prescription drug like metformin or a drug like Jardiance or some other drug that may be used to treat diabetes. Over-the-counter supplement drugs are just preventative to help restore balance or deficiencies that you may not have within your diet.
Great. Thanks for that, breaking that down. Now, who's minding the shop? Who's making sure that the supplements that we take are indeed healthy or do what they say they're going to do?
Well, believe it or not, over-the-counter products are considered foods as it relates to the Food and Drug Administration, right? They are not a drug, but they're considered a food. So there is a little oversight by the FDA. Now, whether you have confidence in the FDA as a result of your political affiliation, I think that there are some people with a lot of integrity who are there, but they are the folks that will issue a warning if they feel like the public is in jeopardy, or there's some sort of hazard that needs to be issued regarding that particular product. So the FDA is there, but there's also the Federal Trade Commission. They're the folks that monitor any bad actors that may be advertising inappropriate ways like all natural or cure. When you start hearing things like that, those are the types of words that should really make you start wondering if this is legitimate or not. But yes, it's the Food and Drug Administration to some degree, but it's also the Federal Trade Commission.
I like how you mentioned that red flag words. Are there any other red flag words that you would add in there? Because I think that, miracle cure or miracle are definitely two that stand out.
Yeah. All natural is the big one. I see that in everybody's marketing because when you look at these products, when you flip that label over and you're trying to decide whether you want Sundown or Nature's Bounty, those are just two I'm mentioning. There are a million other brands that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. But when you flip it over and you see a long list of ingredients, that's when you possibly should be concerned because at that point you're probably getting more of what's called fillers than you are getting the actual active ingredient.
Got it. Now, are there any supplements that pharmacists actually recommend, or ones that you might even take yourself?
Absolutely. I know, again, my colleagues and I discuss these types of questions all the time, but many of us are all about making sure that people take a daily vitamin because the American diet does just not promote, in my opinion, or fortify with just normal vitamins that we may need. Now, of course, if you like a good steak, you're going to get some iron there, but many of us aren't going to be able to get enough vitamin D, especially if you're here up north in the state of Ohio, right? You're just not going to get enough sunlight. So yes, absolutely. And there's many studies out there, especially over the last 5 to 6 years, that would endorse a vitamin D, for instance, because it reduces inflammation. It's been shown for a lot of those folks who are suffering from diabetes to reduce that inflammation. So, and for a lot of other reasons as well. But so when it comes to vitamins, my top 3 are probably a daily vitamin, possibly vitamin D. And if you're feeling sluggish, you might want to take a B complex or some of the B vitamins because they help with metabolism, which may potentially help with blood flow, which could also help with energy and mental clarity. And then, of course, the one that I see probably more than some of these other ones I just mentioned is magnesium. I would not take magnesium oxide because of the amount of fillers that are in it, and make sure you're taking magnesium for the purpose that you need. Some people need it for mental clarity, some people need it for mental health, but magnesium citrate can also be used like that Slim Fast example that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, magnesium can be very effective at getting things moving
Yes.
from a toileting standpoint.
Yes.
But great. So that's a really good list. I often say that with vitamin D, it's always good too to try to get in the target range, which requires a blood test. So it's also good when you go for your annual checkup with your doctors, ordering labs to also ask for a vitamin D level so that you can kind of see that you're in the therapeutic range.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, we also see, you mentioned multivitamins. We see things marketed for different genders, like men versus women, or, silver for XYZ silver for an older age group. Are there really differences? Let's start between men and women. Are there differences in supplements that men and women should be taking, or is it just sort of gimmicky marketing?
Probably a little bit of both, but I will say this. A lot of the folks that I see coming in now for vitamins are younger people, not necessarily so many older people. Now, that could depend on where you are geographically, right? But if I'm just going to stick to a silver versus non-silver, there are some subtle differences. If you are a woman who is suffering from menopause, you're probably not going to need as much iron as you potentially needed when you were in your child rendering years, right? Because you're just the amount of blood that you need is going to differ than what you may need as an older adult. Same thing for men. As men get older, they produce less testosterone. So you may want a vitamin that has more zinc and magnesium, which is known to increase or be some of the building blocks for testosterone. So there really isn't a one size fits all to this. And that's why, the disclaimer always is talk to your pharmacist or talk to your local healthcare provider because, each of us are different. There are genetic variances to all of us. And we may need to have questions about your gut metabolism. How well do you digest certain things and how well do you absorb them? That could dictate whether you're a senior or a silver or non-silver.
Right. And then there's also that pesky issue of if you're on any medicines. So are there certain things that supplements that we should be aware of, if we take medications that might not mix?
Absolutely. That's probably the most important question that we'll answer today, that there's the potential risk for drug interactions. Now, I'm old enough, I don't know about you guys, but there is a drug out there called St. John's wort.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
St. John's wort was used a lot of times for depression, but man, it had a lot of drug interactions. So it potentially blocked your liver from absorbing other drugs, leading to increased concentrations of those drugs, which could have potentially led to some dangerous side effects. So it just depends. Again, I don't want to have kind of have one size fits all approach to this type of answer, but yes, always consult with your healthcare professional, especially if you're trying to treat yourself with iron, vitamin D, because too much of either one of those, particularly iron, if you got too much of it, could potentially lead to an organ damage, and even if you decide with vitamin D, it could also affect your kidney function.
Yes, thank you. That makes perfect sense. So also, sort of on the flip side, are there actually supplements that if you take them together, they work better together? Um, or flip side, ones that you should never combine?
Yeah, that was a great question. Before we talked, I thought that would be a good one. There's quite a bit, there's a long list of those particular drugs, but ones that I see more of is drugs like people who take iron, right? So a lot of folks who take iron, we like to see some vitamin C with that just because, or I'm sorry, yes, we want to make sure that it gets absorbed better. So there are many drugs that potentially are going to help with the absorption or potentially block that absorption. A couple that I felt like were really good were that the iron example, calcium and vitamin D, zinc and magnesium. Those are all drugs. Folate for women as well. It just depends on what you're using that drug to treat. But I think like for instance, iron is probably the one that I see more than any. And a lot of folks don't realize that if you take iron with food, then it blocks the absorption of that iron. So you're on that drug longer than you need to be. So we give you that vitamin C, and that'll help you with the absorption and potentially get you off that drug that can cause harm to your stomach for longer periods of time.
Got it. And then, so you mentioned don't combine iron with food. Are there any other combinations that aren't good news?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second. Did I hear you say which ones are bad news together?
Yes, exactly. Other than iron and food together, that's a no-no. Are there other combinations that you should avoid?
Yeah, a lot of times I always bring up the antacid conversation. A lot of times if you're taking an antacid and you're on an antibiotic, those two things together could neutralize the antibiotic. So if you're on an antibiotic and you start to have an upset stomach, make sure you're staying away from things like milk of magnesia or Pepto-Bismol.
Great. That's really good to know. Now, let's talk about another place that we see a lot of supplements being promoted, and that's on social media with influencers that, by maybe promoting, different powders or pills or tinctures. How do you know? How do you sort of navigate those waters? How do you know what's actually necessary versus just good marketing?
No, the first thing you should do if you have a question about a product, there is a governing body, if you will, that tests the purity integrity of a lot of over-the-counter products, and that's called the USP. www.usp.org is where you would go. That stands for the United States Pharmacopoeia. Now, those folks actually pull products from the shelf, and they'll look at the, again, purity and integrity of that drug. Now, if an influencer is telling you about that drug, and they're using, again, those buzzwords like pure, or cleanse, or I just felt better. Something that's really is just anecdotal evidence from that particular person. You want to make sure you vet that product using the USP as a resource. And if you can, find that particular product and see if the label itself will indicate that there was a clinical trial to support any finding that they may have to support whatever it is, whether it be for mental clarity or for many of these for men to help with erectile dysfunction. A lot of those drugs simply just don't work. So it's you need to make, and I see even Shannon Sharp and some other folks using a lot of those drugs. Maybe I shouldn't say his name on this show, but a lot of these ED drugs just aren't real good drugs for just the average person to use, because now you're promoting even younger generations like 15 and 16-year-olds to go out and get this particular product that could cause harm.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And then another thing, sort of talking about it from a safety perspective, I noticed that in reading supplement labels or multivitamin labels, let me not say multivitamins, but supplements that, let's say it's an anti-inflammatory supplement, it may have some of the same ingredients as another supplement over here. So it might have turmeric or vitamin D or fish oil, and then you're taking another supplement that has some of those same ingredients. Are there any dangers to overdosing for because you just don't realize that, you know, you're taking 5 different supplements and they overlap in certain ingredients?
Absolutely. There are plenty of drugs out there that could lead to an increased risk of bleeding, right? Because many of those anti-inflammatory drugs can lead to an increased risk of bleeding. So if you're taking a drug, whether it be prescription or, even it's just something as simple as an aspirin, that potentially could lead to a stomach bleed over time. There's a lot of different reasons on why you may want to be careful depending on that particular active ingredient.
Got it. No, that
Especially if
makes
it's being duplicated. Basically, we're talking about a duplication of therapy. And one of the, if you're not looking at the strength of that particular ingredient compared to the strength, in another bottle, then you potentially lead to an overdose or cause some sort of bleed.
right. I think the bottom line is read those labels and know exactly what you're putting in your body.
Yes.
Now I can't get away. I can't let you get away without talking about, this whole class of immune boosters, right? Because with COVID, that just became like the main thing that a lot of people were focused on and are still focused on. So, are there any supplements that really, quote unquote, boost immunity in any meaningful way?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that, we talked a little bit about sea moss. I do think there's some antioxidants there that potentially can help with the immune system. But really, when you start talking about immune system, it's all about having good stomach health or what we call gut health. So you could take a probiotic. There are, things like a line, and they look for different types of bacteria, maybe like bifidobacterium or like lactobacillus, and you could look at varying concentrations on what you may need. So there's good health. Good gut health will help with a stronger immune system. Vitamin C is very important. Zinc is very important at potentially poking holes in bacteria and that type of thing, which potentially could reduce your bacterial load. And I'm not trying to call it an antibiotic, but it does have some properties that potentially could slow the progression of an infection.
Good to know. And also too, probiotics are super important. What's the difference between a probiotic and a prebiotic?
Well, a lot of these prebiotics and probiotics are all based on the particular bacteria that you're interested in, right? As far as prebiotic and probiotic, I've never really felt comfortable with understanding really the difference in them, other than the concentration. It's all parts per million, and some come with 1 billion parts per million. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're talking about good gut bacteria. And if you're someone that's using these products that potentially are colon cleans, you're going to need that replacement. And these probiotics have the potential to be that good bacteria replacement. So as far as pre and post, I think it's just a matter of the concentration of that particular probiotic or prebiotic that you're taking.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that colon cleanse because people, we were talking earlier about before the show about some influencer that's talking about how she gets her colon clean once a week. That's just killing all her good bacteria. And I think the probiotics, very important. And you can also get it through food, through certain yogurts and kombucha, etc. And I think the prebiotics, which I think also too are help because they are food basically for the good bacteria. So those are your green leafy vegetables and things like that. So your diet plus also taking the probiotics, I think are really powerful.
So the one
So
thing I would say is important as having a Band-Aid in your first aid kit is having Pedialyte powder packets or just regular old Pedialyte. Because if you have a diarrhea episode that becomes uncontrolled and you don't have Imodium at home or something to slow it down, it could, like you said early on, be life-threatening immediately. So always have Pedialyte packets or Pedialyte available just to restore those electrolytes. I'm not a big fan of Gatorade because it's the amount of sugar that's in them. But look, Pedialyte packets may not be the most flavorful drink that you're going to have, but it can also help save your life, especially if we're talking about little children.
right. Great point. Speaking, you mentioned sea moss. Speaking of supplements that came to prominence during COVID, that one has been heavily promoted, especially in the Black community. Can you speak a little bit to sea moss, because it's being promoted from everything from curing COVID to cancer? So, what does the evidence really say?
Well, the evidence says this, that it does contain iodine, right? So in the American culture, we have iodized salt, which potentially could affect your thyroid. I don't. Now I've known people to make their own sea moss. So to me, that could potentially be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, especially if you do have some sort of thyroid dysfunction. But that's probably the main point to make as far as potential harm. Now, I do believe it has antioxidant properties, and there is no evidence that it cures cancer. Now, I will say this, antioxidants are known to block what's called a free radical in the body. And free radicals a lot of times are what's causes or triggers potential cancers, right? So there is that property. I do think that it's important to keep in that way. Now, people mix it with a lot of different things. I mean, I have friends personally that will use sea moss for erectile dysfunction, and that's because it helps with good blood flow. So it all depends on what the purity of your seaweed, because people order it from all kinds of places, whether it be
Right.
Amazon or your favorite person that you just know on a website. So a lot of it depends on whether you're your own personal pharmacist and whatever you create it. But in general, I do think seaweed is healthy, but it's not going to cure cancer. And you do have to be careful with the concentrations, especially if you're dealing with a thyroid condition.
Right. It wouldn't be recommended to drop all your medications and just take sea moss and hope for the best. Yeah.
No,
But
not at all.
but yes, it does have antioxidant capabilities.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Great.
And well, I still will say this: there is some evidence out there that the gel-like property of it potentially has some gut protection. But again, I personally have not used sea moss, but I do have a lot of patients who come in who ask that question all the time. And it's more anecdotal than it is anything. But I am a firm believer that sometimes people know what they're talking about when in terms of improving their health. But whether it's a placebo or they're something that was reality, I can't speak on. But personally, I think it's a safe product to use in moderation.
Okay. All right. And then I have one other category that I want to ask you about, because a lot of people always ask about memory supplements, and we see
Mm,
a lot of them advertised on television. So they're kind of all over the place, from packaged products to things like ginkgo or lion's mane, which is a mushroom. So do any of them really help with brain fog or forgetfulness?
So I'll say this: anything that helps create good blood flow, I think, can help with brain fog, right? Because in order to establish good memory, short-term memory or even long-term memory, you must create pathways, in your brain to be able to do that. Strong blood flow will help you create will make those pathways to that particular memory, in my opinion, stronger. But I do think that you have to stay away from things like the Benadryl, because things that penetrate the brain barrier potentially could harm it. But like B complex is something I took in pharmacy school. I'm not going to lie, I cheated a little bit because it helped with good. Don't tell my professors that, right? But it did get really good blood flow. And when I'd wake up, my eyes were dilated and ready to go. And so I wouldn't just recommend that for everyone, but I do believe lion's mane, anything that promotes good blood flow. I'm not a big fan of mushrooms that I've never tried before, and I don't have a study of primary research study that I can quote from it, but I do know people who have tried it and it's worked for them. But whether it's placebo again or reality, I'm not sure. But I would endorse B complex or the B vitamins, because they increase metabolism, which ultimately creates blood flow, and that hopefully will that blood flow will reach the brain and make those pathways stronger.
Right. I think, just as you said, we talked a little bit about placebo, just being clear that somebody's individual experience with
Yes.
a supplement is not enough to generalize and give advice. That's why we have, randomized controlled clinical trials where we're testing a supplement or an intervention against, basically doing nothing, but having what's called a placebo to sort of balance it out. So maybe like a sugar pill, to see, is it just somebody's imagination, or is it actually a difference that we see when we look at multiple people over time. So a lot, unfortunately, of the supplements have not had that rigor in terms of testing. So, we just have to, obviously B vitamins clearly have, but
I didn't mention that either too, probably.
Lion's Mane has it, right? So,
and I probably should have mentioned that too when I was talking about the difference between a supplement and what's an actual prescription, right? Supplements just don't undergo that rigorous testing like you just mentioned, where versus prescribed drugs, there's millions of dollars, maybe even more than that for some of these drugs that go into the research and development of these drugs before the FDA allows it to reach the general public. If it's a vitamin, in most cases, you're kind of on your own, and a lot of times before that, when there's harm, by the time it actually reaches the Federal Trade Commission or the FDA, it's too late. Many people potentially have had a side effect or even potentially even lost their life.
yeah. So I can't believe it's time to bring Wayne and Lila back in and see,
I know it
what's
got
going on in
dark.
the chat.
It got dark all of a sudden. I said, man, I need to bring light in here. Gosh, wow. Okay, this is the pillow talk version of
of pharmaceuticals,
over the
right?
counter.
We're not in pillow talk.
Yeah.
Hopefully we didn't put anyone to sleep here.
No, I think I hope we having some good questions out there in the chat, and also just want to reemphasize something else that you said, which is always check with your physician before you decide to take a supplement, especially if you're already on medications or have a health condition, because you want to make sure it doesn't interact with anything you already have going on. So,
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So what y'all got out there?
You got them first? Okay, I got them. Sherry Dampier, as I heard that turmeric can cause bleeding in the gut. What is your take?
Well, I don't have a lot of studies that support turmeric as a potential bleed. It's used as an ingredient in many different cultures all the time. And, I see a lot of those folks coming to the pharmacy, and that's not something that I'm aware of. So I really can't answer that question with 100% confidence right now, but I really wouldn't be able to say yes or no as it relates to a bleed.
Okay.
I've never heard that, but
yeah, I hadn't heard that
some
either.
room for research.
No.
I have a question. So, in following our recap on Benadryl, we're staying away from Benadryl. Does melatonin for sleep actually work? Is that a supplement that folks should explore?
Yeah, it probably should have made my top 5. It's one of the drugs that I dispense often, whether you're taking a 3, 5, or 10 milligram. As you get older, you just produce less melatonin. It's a hormone that we naturally produce to keep us in our deeper state of sleep. When I worked in DC, everybody takes melatonin because of the amount of travel that they do internationally, and it works. And as a young pharmacy student, that's where I did more digging into melatonin and felt more comfortable with making a recommendation for folks who needed sleep. So sleep is very tricky, by the way. I don't want to just recommend that for anyone, but it's also used for kids. I mean, we hear it all the time for kids who are unable to sleep, and we could give them those berries. And I feel like it's a safe alternative when we start talking about penetrating that blood-brain barrier to help someone get to sleep and remain in a stable condition while they're sleeping.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, sleep is tricky. If you're having long-term sleep problems, talk with your doctor about all the myriad of reasons why you might be having problems sleeping, as opposed to just trying to self-medicate. And stay away from the Benadryl for sleep long-term.
Yeah, the Benadryl, I mean, look, you talked about anticholinergic activity. I thought that was absolutely awesome. I haven't heard that in a long time. But, that was really, really good stuff. I mean, for the folks that really understood that, and they have a better understanding of how that potentially could lead to dementia. But anything that penetrates the blood-brain barrier and puts you to sleep, you should always be a little wary of and under the care of or supervision of a provider, unless it's just something like Benadryl you're using as needed, not daily.
Right.
To sort of piggyback on that, so obviously you would take melatonin at night, but are there certain supplements that should be taken in the morning or at night for their effectiveness?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, if you're going to take a B complex vitamin, you want to take that in the morning when it's going to get absorbed into your gut and cause you to be active and have more energy and have more blood flow, right? So I would say that you would want to take that in the morning. If you're going to take something like an aspirin, for whatever reason, I would make sure you take that in the morning as well, just because it's an anti-inflammatory. You might have breakfast, and I think it's better taken if you have it with a meal.
Okay.
Okay. We have a question from Yo D. Spruill. She writes, what are your thoughts on magnesium itherione for brain health for seniors?
Oh, look, that's a big one. I thought we'd have that actually as a question about magnesium. Magnesium does work very well, in my opinion, for good blood flow. I mean, I do know a lot of folks that have just put on magnesium 400 milligrams, and their mental clarity has improved a little bit. Again, I'm not that person. I've heard enough people. Sometimes when I hear enough people tell me about a particular product, I'm willing to endorse it more. And that is one of those drugs. Now, again, I would stay away from magnesium oxide. I just don't like the inactive ingredients in that particular. So I would go with maleate or gluconate. I think those are better. But yes, I do believe that magnesium does help for mental clarity and good heart health.
Oh.
All right.
Okay. So doctors, for people who are already eating a healthy diet, do supplements add anything, or are they just expensive insurance?
Well, I think that if you're being proactive about your health, there's nothing wrong with maximizing, the way you feel with a vitamin, for instance, right? You may not, even if you feel healthy and strong, I don't feel like it's going to harm you to have any additional minerals like zinc or iron, especially, again, if you're young and healthy. Those are things you're going to need. And from my understanding and just learning everything I've learned about biochemistry, if you have a little bit too much of it, it's not typically harmful. You'll eliminate it out in your urine.
Okay.
But it just depends on what it is. Again, and some of these answers are not cookie cutter, right? So
Yeah.
I don't want to say that.
Just to be clear, you mentioned a multivitamin specifically.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's really no one size fits all approach to, medication in general. I'm a proponent of, precision medicine, and that's what we're moving towards in this country. And I'm really excited about that. So if you don't have a pharmacist who's talking the way I'm talking about precision medicine versus that one size fits all, then find you a different pharmacist.
That's a word. You should repeat that, Dr. Jackson, because my pharmacist never talks like this.
No. Precision medicine is where you should be going. Well, how does this particular product affect you and you only?
Okay.
Now, of course, we can't make everything, tailored to us, but we're going to do our best to figure that out, because anytime you take something by mouth, whether it's food or drink, or of course a pill, you're changing your biochemistry, and that's important whenever you're doing it.
Okay. What about gummies? There's a gummy for almost everything.
Everything.
Are we talking about THC and?
No. I mean, not THC.
I just want to make sure I know what we're talking about here, because when I hear gummy from all the people I know, they're always a THC gummy, and I'm like, come on.
The travel gummy. The travel gummy.
We're not talking about those today. Not right now. Good. But there are gummies for everything. There are gummies for multivitamins, supplements, those kinds of things, right? Apple cider vinegar. There's gummies for everything. Are they healthy or more like?
Yeah. No, I mean, many people would prefer a gummy for a lot of different things, right? Versus a tablet that's got fillers and ingredients in it that potentially could lead to discomfort in the stomach, or just, figure a weird way of releasing, or taking a long time release that potentially could cause some GI upset. But the only thing I'll say, about gummies is I deal with a lot of folks who are Somalian, and they don't like eating pork. So a lot of those folks would prefer a gummy over a capsule, because a lot of our gelatin capsules contain animal byproducts in it. So it's just another opportunity for those folks to be able to get medication that they want without violating any type of belief.
That's great to know.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of folks, need to know that if they are Muslim and they do not eat pork, then many of those capsules have a animal byproduct in it. So they need to be aware of that. But of course, that's not going to be put on the label, right?
Right.
Because they don't eliminate those folks, but it is in there. And if you looked at the inactive ingredient, you'll be able to see on the back of it. They will list it, but if you're not paying attention, you'll take that particular product and then maybe be upset with yourself.
Read those labels.
Yes.
So we got a question from Rhoda Lawrence in West Coast. She asks, what are your thoughts on and opinions on oregano and black seed oils? Have you seen examples of positive outcomes? And should we be paying attention to the expiration dates on our supplements?
I don't know much about oregano, being a replacement or some sort of health affect your baseline health in any way. I guess you could say I'm not well versed on oregano. Black seed oil, I've heard that used periodically, but just not enough to really give you a confident answer. I can maybe send you some information on that. I don't want to misspeak. But as far as it relates to the expired drugs, many boards of pharmacy all over the United States have came out and said that even though there is a shelf life expiration on the bottle, if it's in a controlled environment, meaning not your bathroom where it's hot, cold from taking a shower and then it cooling down, the activity of that particular product should remain the same. And even though it sounds weird that I would say, yes, you could take an expired drug if it's been in a controlled space. I think that it does have a longer life to it. If it's a tablet. Now, if we're talking about, again, it's got to be in a controlled environment. I mean, this is, again, direction for many boards of pharmacy that came out a couple of years ago that shelf life could be extended. However, I'm going to always err on the side of caution. If it's a couple of dollars, just get it replaced.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you say stable environment, it often says on the bottle, store in a cool, dry place.
Yes.
So that's what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So if the product gets heated, a lot of time the stability of that particular product can change. So if it's hot then cold, then the potency of that particular product may not be the same. And this happens all the time with insulins. People ask me all the time whether or not they live in a hot environment. They actually leave their insulin pen out in 90 degrees. That particular product isn't as active as it used to be. So, you need to be careful with drugs like that and temperature.
Right. There's some medications need to be, they need to be stored in the refrigerator, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you kind of got into this with Dr. Mel, but I just sort of want to highlight again any ingredients that we should be looking out for that are red flags in supplements. Can you give us some of those?
There are a lot. That's a long list, actually. But they're in such small concentrations. I don't think we got to worry about it. Now, believe it or not, I am not a fan of dyes, right? Because there's a lot of allergies to dyes. So to answer that question, I think it would really depend on what you already know and are aware of in terms of your allergies. Because many products that we take, and ingredients that maybe I wouldn't necessarily endorse don't affect anyone, but you've heard a lot of bad things about it. But dyes, unfortunately, I have seen children who I've given an antibiotic and that red dye potentially caused them to have allergic reaction. So I'm not a fan of dyes, any color dye.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
One other question from Marv West is
Marv West. Oh my goodness.
Is D3 enhanced with K2? Some brands are sold like that. I don't know. Is he talking about vitamin D3?
Say that again. Yeah. D3 and D2. Yeah, I mean, D3 and D2 are, prescribed a lot. You'll see D2. D2 is not the active form of vitamin D, so it needs to be converted to D3 to its active form. So that's really what you see most of the time in terms of pharmacy now is the active form of vitamin D, which is D3. So I think as long as you have a healthy liver, and you don't have to worry about whether or not you got D2 or D3. But for those folks, most doctors now prescribe D3. I very rarely see D2 anymore. Now the concentrations could be different. Now, if you're getting 50,000 units, then that's a prescription strength. But if you're just taking 1,000 or 2,000 units, just because you've heard something good about potential inflammation in the body and how it can improve the inflammation, then yes, I would just say 1,000 or 2,000 milligrams. As long as you're not, and potentially, if you're taking a multivitamin, see how much vitamin D is in that multivitamin. But still have that conversation with your provider. depending on, what condition you're trying to treat.
Right. And back very quickly to the question that Lila asked about any harmful things in supplements. What would you say about those supplements that, say they give you energy and have large amounts of caffeine, or
Yes.
I think about Fen a few years ago. Yeah, anything you want to add on those?
Yeah, if depending, especially with teenagers nowadays, if it comes in a dry powder form, don't don't take it in its dry powder form because it's highly concentrated. That's what a lot of teenagers are doing right now. They're crushing these drugs or crushing these pills up to get that caffeine in that raw form, where it's the moment you inject or the moment you swallow it in its dry form, it's immediately in and active into the bloodstream. That potentially could affect that heart rhythm and lead to a heart attack quickly. This happens all the time, but especially products with caffeine, you need to be very, very careful with. That includes coffee, folks. Because it potentially can lead over time to severe headaches, especially if you decide to stop and want to reduce the amount that you're taking in. You will go through a withdrawal period. It's based off of my observation, what I've seen. Now, everybody's different, but the moment you try to stop on your own, a lot of time, depending on how much caffeine you've taken in, you will begin to have headaches. And that could potentially, well, let's not even talk about the effect it may have on your blood pressure for someone who's already experiencing hypertension. That is already maybe at stroke level every single day, and now you're increasing your risk by the higher intakes of caffeine.
Right. Huge point there, especially for people, like you said, who have underlying heart blood vessel or high blood pressure issues to begin with. Well, this has been a whirlwind through supplements. Thank you
A
so
dark
much.
one. Gosh, I can't believe we got dark one.
It is that
I
time
wanted
of
to get up
day.
and turn the light on, but man, I guess this is the way it's going to go tonight.
Yeah, but we can see you fine, and more importantly, we can hear you great as you just lay down all that great knowledge for us. So we appreciate your being here, and thank you, as always, Wayne and Lila, for being the co-hosts with the most. And thank you, Be Health Empowered family, for the great questions. We'll see you next time. Be wise, be well, and be health empowered. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, guys.